Welcome to the Private Equity Experience Podcast, your backstage pass to the strategies, stories, and secrets that drive value in the PE universe. No filters, no fluff, just straight talk and expert insights to help you navigate the private equity world with confidence. And now your hosts, Ed Barton, Rory Liebhardt, and Emily Sander.
Ed, Rory, dilly, due diligence.
Dilly.
Due diligence. What is this and where does it fit into the process?
In business or in life, because it could be applicable in so many ways.
How do you conduct due diligence on potential partners? No, we're talking about business. Let's do, well, I guess that could be used for both business and personal.
Yeah.
It's all the same. Do you create spreadsheets and virtual data rooms for your potential?
Dilly.
You probably do, actually.
Dilly.
You think in spreadsheets. No, so we're talking about due diligence. When someone is looking to buy your company, they are going to conduct due diligence, as would make sense. If you are going to invest millions and millions of dollars in a company, you want to know what's up. And so due diligence is the official process and way of figuring out what's up with this company for real.
Yeah. I mean, at the heart of it, due diligence is really, it is a deep investigation into the information supporting a decision, a transaction, an action that you're looking to take. So at the heart of it, you're just doing investigative work on a potential outcome you're trying to consider, basically.
The due diligence process is the driver for your valuation, all things being equal. So, you've got business, and what that process does is basically, you've said, my business does all these wonderful things and it's got these capabilities, and, we're the best, shoe manufacturer in the United States, and we need to buy us. And due diligence is really the confirmation of all the things you're claiming. And so it can be a very, very, very deep dive.
Yeah. And I mean, it covers various things under the umbrella of due diligence. I mean, you have financial due diligence, you have legal due diligence, you have operational due diligence, you have market due diligence. I mean, everything that goes into a business that comes under scrutiny during a time of, let's say, acquisition or M&A or sort of a transaction, that's all wrapped up in this concept of due diligence. You're really, deep diving on the business entirely, as Ed said, in, oftentimes a very compressed amount of time. So it becomes a very critical and oftentimes stressful part of that deal framework.
Yes. And so would you say they're trying to find things, quote unquote, wrong with it? Or we use the analogy of like buying a house. And so when someone goes in for inspection, they're looking for things to let me pay less. Are they looking for that? Are they looking for no confirmatory evidence that we want to buy this thing, or just tell us what's going on under the hood so we can make adjustments and then decide to move forward and have a plan from there?
All of the above. Truly. It is truly all of the above. Really, I've generally said you've got a couple phases of due diligence. To me, there's got to be first phase or preliminary due diligence where they're really trying to get a feel for the business, the operations, how you do things, the management team. They're not digging deep, but they're digging broad and going, okay, do we really feel like we got a good understanding of this? And that's normally done if you're in a transaction. That's normally done kind of after the first set of meetings. They'll open parts of the data room and kind of let the potential buyers go in before they submit their letter of intent or indication of interest. And then once you kind of get through that, on their side, on the private equity purchaser side, they've come up with that investment thesis. This is what we think the investment could do. This is what we expect to be able to get for efficiencies. This is what we can do from a capital perspective for, balance sheet engineering. And then you go to the next phase of diligence, which is confirmatory diligence, which is now we want to confirm all the assumptions that we've put in there, and we want to make sure that there is no surprises. Now, everybody knows there's always going to be surprises, but the fewer surprises, the better. And the more you can cooperate and disclose, we talk about finance theory in this pod. So the more you can disclose, the lower the risk premium, which means the higher the value of the business. Those two phases of diligence are important because they're looking at very different things. One is coming up with a thesis, understanding the business before they put an indication of interest or LOI in. And then the second is really to confirm all those assumptions and try and make sure that there's no surprises.
Yeah. So the first one is kind of like a surface level, like let me just sniff around and get a lay of the land. And then the second one, I've heard someone on this podcast describe as like a anal probe, where it's like, okay, we're doing a full look at the inside of this
Proctal exam,
full proctology exam.
Yeah.
The other piece is for the founders and management teams to recognize as diligence starts at the time you sign up the investment banker.
Mm-hmm.
So the investment banker is going to do diligence on you to make sure you're ready. A lot of times they're on a contingency fee, so they don't want to bone cycles without feeling like you've got a transactable business. And then after that, when you've got prospective buyers, that diligence starts with their first teaser and your first conversation. They're going, okay, is this somebody who I could partner with? How do they make me feel? Are they smarmy? Do I feel like this is, they're trying to hide something? So diligence starts, that preliminary diligence or kind of initial diligence phase starts the minute you decide to start putting your business on the market, and doesn't end until after the deal closes.
Yeah. Every piece of information that is shared between parties is subject to scrutiny, challenge, validation, and that's what comprises due diligence. What I would say as well is due diligence is a very costly process for all involved, and we can get into, the throes of it. But basically, I've been part of deals where I know for a fact that the other side, the potential acquiring party, is spending millions of dollars to validate this as a potential transaction. So while I agree with Ed's broad statement that they're looking for, validation either way, I'd say most parties get to this phase of deep diligence with the intent that they can move forward with the deal. They don't want to spend millions of dollars for nothing. There's something in the game skin wise for all parties at a certain point. But up front, I think, that's why the due diligence process is done, as Ed said, in a phased manner. Typically, what I've observed is that, the customer due diligence, the market due diligence, the things that underpin the business, your business model, is kind of what's pushed up front so that can be validated first, followed by financial due diligence. And then lastly, which gets to be kind of the most expensive piece of it, is the legal due diligence, all of the stuff involved with that. Regulatory due diligence, compliance due diligence, that's stuff that you need to validate. But if you can't get past the business diligence and the financial diligence, there's no point in spending the money and energy on all the other supplementary pieces of that.
Okay, so this process, the later stages of it are very thorough. I'm going to use that word. But this is also critical to determining the valuation. So if you're a founder, you want to pay attention and be ready for this, which is part of why you listen to this podcast, so we can kind of tell you what's coming your way. But how does this process work? Like, who on the PE team are you going to be dealing with? What are green flags? What are red flags? Just how does this process work if you're like a first-time founder going through due diligence?
Yeah, exactly right. And I think you kind of touched on it there, green flags, red flags. I think, the red flags are the things that people really, kind of expect to find in some ways. Just every business has its own little skeletons in the closet, it seems, things like that. But the point is to get your arms around that. It doesn't mean just because those exist that there's not a deal to be done.
Right.
If you understand them and you understand the implications, you usually get past these things. But it's those green flags that are interesting. I mean, I was just having a separate conversation with Ed about a deal he was involved with where, I know Ed was doing deep diligence and found some opportunities and then closed the deal. And turns out those opportunities are green flags, and there's going to be a better deal than what he paid prospectively. So those are things that can happen, but that's only a result of the thorough work being done on the buying party, and then the heavy work doing on the party that's selling and getting the information put together in a way that can be digested and relied upon and ultimately trusted at the end of the day.
Yeah, and the one thing to keep in mind, I think, if you're a founding management team and you haven't been through this before, is be prepared to be overwhelmed. And the reason I see that is when the diligence starts, it's going to be a couple private equity folks. You'll have an associate, a principal, or a VP level director, managing director. So there'll be 3 or 4 folks who'll be playing from the private equity side. Once you move to confirmatory, as Rory noted, the last deal where I was on sell side, the buyer probably spent 22 to 25% of the purchase price on diligence.
Yeah.
I mean, so it was a $20 million deal. They may have spent $5 million on diligence. Mm-hmm. So it was a ridiculous, from my seat as a seller, ridiculous diligence.
Yeah.
But you had not only did you have the private equity folks, you had their operating partners were involved in their various areas. So you had folks basically who were kind of the acquiring company CFO, the acquiring company. So it was private equity backed, a merger with one of their other portfolio companies. So you have their operating partners in. Yep. They had IT consultants come in to look at the systems and determine what technical debt needed to be retired or what we should do with our stack. They had accounting folks come in, including forensic type accountants, to be able to go back through our kind of all of our transactions over the last couple of years to determine, because we had net operating losses, whether it was more beneficial to acquire the operating entity or to acquire the assets. They had legal due diligence, including 2 different law firms, one for intellectual property and another one for transaction. So it was, and it's just, there was just like 4 of us on the management side trying to juggle all that stuff.
Yeah.
And you had another consulting firm coming in to validate the market analysis that we had provided for a couple of our products. So it was overwhelming as on the sell side, and just be prepared to all of a sudden have an army of consultants, accountants, lawyers, computer scientists, and everybody else descend upon you and be requesting tons of information. And on the flip side of that, lean on the investment bank to help you prioritize, manage that workflow, and set expectations with the buyer. That's part of their job.
Yeah.
And I think, this is all happening while you're doing your day job. And so part of the prep is setting it up so you can lift out, hopefully, and someone can maybe take point or just know that, hey, I'm not going to be as responsive, or set up processes. How long does diligence typically take, if there's a typically? What is what are we talking? Weeks, months, years? Just give people a broad brush.
Yeah. I put it on 3 to 6 months typically, and it could be anywhere in between. Depends on the complexity of the deal, depends on how simple your business is, what industry you're in as far as, call it regulatory hurdles go and things like that. It depends on how deep your cap table is. There's a lot of things that could go into, whether what hoops need to be jumped through for you to actually sell your business, or the equity in your business, or the assets of your business, et cetera. So there's really can run the gamut. Is your business international focus, or is it domestic? The services based industry, manufacturing, totally different tracks in that way. But it does come down to kind of investigating the same sorts of things. Just keep coming back to the financials, the market, the product, the legal, the compliance, the operation. But it just has different levels of complexity. In a service oriented business where you don't really have a physical workspace, and it's not capital intensive in terms of CapEx, then a lot of that can be done pretty remotely. But if you're buying a oil well manufacturer, that's pretty on the ground. You need to go investigate the dirt and see if it can be fracked up or whatever the hell. It's like there's actual tangible things you need to touch in certain businesses. Whereas I've personally worked for mostly services based businesses where it's pretty light on that kind of stuff, but it can be pretty intensive if it's a business that involves a lot of people and a lot of locations and a lot of terra firma, let's say. Yeah,
that's a good point. And I think
I was going to say the other thing
I
to
was just
keep in mind is you're running in parallel to the diligence, the confirmatory diligence. You're generally running the process to put the final agreements together, so the asset purchase agreement or whatever format that agreement is gonna come in.
Yeah.
And everything they find in diligence then starts another cycle through the agreement because they go, oh, we've identified something we want to have a reputable warranty on that, or we want to have an indemnification against that, or we want to retrade the deal, or we're going to have an additional, additional like that. These deals are like 2-3 inches thick, and they've got a bunch of disclosures, and they go, oh, we're going to need to disclose this, and so
sometimes I swear attorneys are paid by the red line keystroke. You know what I mean? Like some of these things just look like a bloodbath when you get them back.
We do endeavor to make sure that the billable hours requirement is met.
You're being thorough. You're being very thorough.
Yes. That's where you're going to end up with
yes.
But that entire, you're running multiple work streams. And the diligence piece, you're going to have financial diligence, the tech diligence, risk diligence with insurance, all those things running parallel to the legal drafting of the documents. And anything that comes up in any of those parallel work streams dumps into the legal drafting of the documents generally and will impact the deal. So, and then they go and iterate again. They'll go, oh, well, that's a risk. Why don't you look deeper at that? Yep.
Yeah.
So, and then how often are you running multiple due diligence processes at once? Could you be doing
normally
that?
will not have, I was about to say during the preliminary phase. So during the kind of, we're out in market. We don't have indication of interest LOI. You may have 4 or 5 firms looking at you at the same time, all with similar, but somewhat different asks.
What about
and again,
confirmatory
the investment
diligence?
bank, a confirmatory, you're normally running one. At least my experience is we normally have, we go through the beauty contest to get the indications of interest or the letters of intent. You go, okay, this one's the prettiest. I'm going to go out with her or him. And then that becomes the one you're doing confirmatory on. And because again, as Rory noted, it's millions, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. And so both the person who's doing the diligence and the company don't want to do, they're not going to spin up those cycles if they don't think they're going to win the deal. So you're generally going to have one at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been part of some interesting ones, actually. I mean, in the last stop I was at prior to kind of stepping out and doing some consulting work, I was in an interesting position where my company was bought and there was a diligence process associated with that, then subsequently carved out and sold. And there was a diligence process with that, all in basically this sort of, continuous cycle of like 18 months of just diligence work to do a couple different transactions. So, and I've been, kind of party to some other situations too, where, a company's being acquired and then immediately they're going to go out and buy another business, right? Like, so there's just, you get to a certain point of sophistication. These PE groups are extremely sophisticated, and this is what they do, where they have these as just part of their core business. But to Ed's point earlier, and what we talked about with being on the sort of side of a founder or a company selling, for the first time or something like that, it is absolutely new territory, and it can be really stressful on the business, especially if the deal doesn't actually get done. So you go through all this process only to basically have a deal fall through.
Looks sick. Ed looks physically sick.
Yeah, and I mean that just it really takes a toll. So, it comes back to what we've covered in our book, in our prior podcasts, is like, be really clear on what your objectives are to sell, what your, what pieces of that can you coordinate for and plan for, get all your team in place before you actually pull the trigger on the process. Cause a dead process is really deleterious to, your business and your life. Like you may have been spending that money before you got it. You know what I mean? Like that's
that never happens with founders.
Yeah.
Come on, Rory.
And recognize,
you just make it up in volume,
what,
I guess, later on.
Recognize what Rory just said, which is, it's incredibly stressful. Recognize that diligence is running in parallel, and you don't want the process to be a failed process. So some of your more cutthroat
I know
private equity firms will give you a very attractive letter of intent, indication of interest, run you into diligence, and then retrade the deal a couple times. Because
I know a person on this call might have done that. I was kidding.
Because you just don't, you're like, I've been at this for like 6 months, and I've just got to be done. And they go, well, we're going to have to knock off 10% of the purchase price because, we've identified this, that, and the other thing. So that's where the investment bank is important, because they've generally dealt with the private equity folks before. They want to get a deal done, and you can get some insight both from the investment bankers as well as just kind of ask it around. What's the reputation of this of the private equity firm or growth capital firm that you're talking to, and do they have a tendency to retrade deals? Because if they do, just be prepared for it and go into diligence accordingly, and you'll be fine.
And I mean, some PE firms, like there's different personalities and approaches, but some people know that people get worn out. It's like, oh my gosh, like all this sunk cost, it's been 6 months. I'm so tired, just drag this thing across the finish line. And some people know that, and they'll play that game. And some people are like, no, I actually need to know this information to feel comfortable giving you.
It's like going in to buy a new car.
Yeah.
They'll just wear you down until you say, yes, let me get the new car and get out of here. Well, it works.
I will say this though, like, I think that, I think stats out there would indicate, the average PE firm looks at probably, call it 30 to 50 deals a year, maybe do one or two. So, once they do kind of get committed to a deal, they do want to see it through ultimately, because it's a waste of their time. It's both tangible cost that's sunk, but it's also opportunity cost that's sunk if you spend more time than you need to on a deal. So I think that overall there's an inherent level of tension on both sides, that once you get to a certain point, you both do want to see the finish line. Because if they start to really believe in your business and believe, especially in the management team running the business, like, they're seeing the dollar signs, and that's what they're built to do, is to deploy capital and make money. So you do have an inherent alignment, I think. But deals fall apart. I've been part of those, and it sucks. But that's just how it goes sometimes.
Okay, so we've got this 3 to 6 month long process. It's very thorough, but if you're prepared, it can go relatively smoothly if you know what you're getting into. As Faye says, no, it's always just going to be kind of a slog. Let's talk about first how this can go badly, and then talk about how to make it go smoothly and good case scenario. So I have an example where something big was missed during due diligence, and it was regarding a tech stack. And one of the things to note is the level of due diligence. Rory was mentioning all the different factors that go into the level of effort of due diligence. One is how the investor is going to use that company. So for instance, we work for a data company, and some potential buyers just wanted our data. So if they were to have bought us, they would have gutted the thing and just taken the data, and that's what they wanted. Other people might want like your customers and your tech stack and your people. And so those might be things they look at thoroughly. So in this one instance, there was, I don't know, like an oversight, or people weren't looking hard enough, or people were being creative with how they presented things, but the tech stack was not thoroughly investigated. And that came back to bite us hard later on. And so, Ed, do you want to talk through like what happens when those things take place, like clawbacks or clauses in place at the beginning to kind of help prevent or mitigate those things?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that those could be mitigated. The first is you've got an escrow, which essentially so the deal you're going through the deal process, and something comes up, and you're like, oh crap, we've got to, again, it comes up during diligence. So you talked about something that was missed. If it comes up during diligence, it's likely to get addressed either in terms of a retrade, a disclosure, or an indemnification or a rep and warn. If you rep and warn all this stuff like my tech stack is great, everything's super and blah, 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 and then it got missed, you're likely to get into, what the technical term is a pissing contest with as a seller, with the buyer post-sale. And there's generally this concept of an escrow where they go, look, we're going to buy the company, let's say for $100 million, but we're going to hold $10 million back. and we're going to true up any non-collectible receivables or any claims that we have that are larger than a de minimis amount. That de minimis amount is
Is this
called
like
the
the security
basket.
deposit on an apartment?
It kind of is. And they've got this thing called a basket where they may go, it's got to exceed $500,000. And if it does, then we'll start dealing with it because they know it's going to be a little bit of a urination contest between, I agree, I don't agree. In the case that you're talking about, which I was involved in, there was no rep and warrant on the tech stack. They had brought in a third-party consultant. And so as a result, the issue was then between a private equity firm and a third-party consultant, not between the private equity firm and the seller, because there was nothing rec warranted as far as that. So it then fell to the portfolio company, i.e. you and I and several others, to get that fixed versus, what would have been no, this is all good and everything's great, and here's the SOC report and all the other good stuff on the tech stack, and then it fails, it could be on the seller.
What happens, Ed or Rory, if, I'm going to say hypothetically, but we may or may not have been involved in this too, where a founder would intentionally steer the due diligence folks away from certain information or just flat out lie? Like, what if someone hypothetically just like flat out lies about the state of their tech stack or company or whatever?
That's not a good method to take. I think that on the extreme side, it could lead to downstream litigation and, other punitive ways of compensating for those lies and omissions. At the very least, it erodes trust completely, I'd say. And trust is such a big part of business and life, and especially in these deals where you're talking about large sums of money. So it happens, though. I think some people have a hard time walking that blurred line between, overselling your business with maybe not evil intentions versus out and out lying. I do think that some of those things happen without complete ill intent, rather than just saying, hey, I'm highlighting the good, right? So, but what happens, many things could happen, not the least of which is a deal falling apart or, a purchase price being vastly reduced to account for whatever that is, plus some punitive retrade, because, and then we'll certainly travel about that business and that founder or whomever it is. You might have a real hard time marketing your business or yourself as part of that business in the future if you take that tack. So definitely not wise.
Okay. Any other warning stories or just, hey, here's how to make this process as less, as painless as possible?
Yeah, I'd like to say it always starts kind of before you go down the path. And I think what I like to call good corporate hygiene is something to focus on. You're going to be sharing deep information with qualified parties. So make sure the information you end up sharing is really well organized, tells the right story in a truthful way. And you don't leave any stone really unturned, because time can kill deals. So the faster you move through your diligence process, the more likely you are to get a good deal done, let alone at the purchase price that may have been coming through at the letter of intent level, which is always kind of a headline price. So just prepare ahead of you if you can. I like to suggest to companies, set up a data room well in advance, populate that thing, and continue to evolve it as information becomes more updated. So as you grow your client base, as you add new contracts, as your financials evolve, just have a habit of keeping a data room populated. So when the time comes, you're not scrambling to put it all together in short order, probably missing some things, not giving proper level of scrutiny to it, and then just start off on the right foot. Make it easy for the suitors to look at your information, have conversation with you about it, make disclosures, that are reasonable, so that people, they're going to find things regardless. And we talked about that in the book. So you might as well get it out there in the way that makes sense. If there's questions about some of the things in your business. And
what are some of the core pieces that you can and should put in that data room, knowing that you don't know the buyer yet, you don't know the exact type of diligence that's going to be conducted, but they're always going to want to know about these things?
Well,
Yeah.
I was going to say there's a few things that start with the what would you want to know.
Yes. Great way to
So
put that.
so if you were going out to buy this business, what would you want to know?
Yeah.
And then the second thing you need to put in there is what don't they know that if they find out is going to blow this deal up, and put it in there. Because if you don't, they will find it. And that's the fastest way. So, most of the deals that I've seen between private equity and founders, they end up going sideways at some point. Now, sometimes they pull it back together, and other times it goes off the rails, and then you got to and then you get changed out as a founder. And that can be, obviously a very distressing experience. The fastest way to get yourself fired from your own company, if it's private equity sold, is to not be forthcoming in diligence. And because now you've destroyed the trust that you theoretically were supposed to be building over the course of that diligence period, that's something that they are looking for. Is this management team a management team we can trust, that we can work with? We're about to invest tens of millions or hundreds of $1,000,000 of our limited partners' capital. Can we trust these folks to be good stewards of that capital? And so number one is put anything in there that you would want to know. So financial statements, if there's any, disclosures around lawsuits or, and people issues and any of those things that are, some risk factors and opportunities as well. So it's not all negative, but, and then anything that, if it's going to blow the deal up, if it's found out later, get it out on the table. Actually, you should be talking to the investment banker about that before the deal goes to market, on how best to position it, because they could use it as a buying opportunity. So our tech stack is terrible. Okay, fine. This is a great opportunity to find a strategic buyer or a private equity firm that may have somebody in their portfolio where that becomes a competitive advantage to them in the deal space. And then the investment bank can position you in a way that, they turn a negative into a positive, or at least a neutral.
Yep.
Yeah. So
exactly.
And I think a good guideline for people is just, they will find everything. It's just a matter of when. And so you need to be strategic about when you disclose that, because they will find everything. And so you want that to be all up front. And like Ed and Rory were just mentioning, you might think this is the worst thing in the world. Like, oh shit, like this, I can't tell them this. They might go, oh, I can flip that into an advantage. Or like, oh, we've seen that before. That's not that bad. That's just an opportunity we can have to create an efficiency.
Well, information is power both ways in a way. Like you share more information to help them understand your business more. It's possible that in their initial look at your business, they're missing some opportunities that you might be able to articulate with what you share. You couple that with having multiple players at the table that have maybe, slightly different perspectives on what they want to do with your business once they acquire it. That could turn into higher valuation for you. Again, don't hold back because, you get a diligence request list and it only has certain things on it. If you have things that accentuate your business in a favorable yet truthful way, that is the quickest way to convince somebody that they need to pay higher value for your business, if you can articulate it with data and information, for sure, rather than just pure anecdote, for sure.
Yeah. And I think what we're talking about here is the best way to increase the valuation of the company, which is through this process, which is thorough and can be like overwhelming sometimes. It is just having these conversations and establishing this foundation of trust, where just these layers and these different stories that you're able to tell. And you have these conversations like, yep, we did this by duct tape and yarn because that's what we had. And so this is what it is today. Given funding, we can make this better. So I think telling those stories all throughout the process and just developing that rapport is where it goes well. Anything else either of you would add of, here's a smooth due diligence process, or here's how you really optimize this process?
I think one of the biggest things is, and we talked about this in one of the prior episodes, is have your team assembled ahead. Work with the investment banker. They do this for a living, right? So you can work through they'll walk you through what's going to get looked at, where the major issues are. Treat them as kind of your trusted advisor, because they need to be, and lay it all out there and help them understand your business better, so they can help you position the business better, get you through diligence. I can't stress enough that having that team put together, your attorneys, your accountants, and most of all, your investment banker in this particular case, and a good one who's been through these things before, will be able to help you lay out all of that and prep you for diligence so that your data room's ready. You've been kind of pre-wired with questions and answers, and they know who the buying universe is, and they're going to put you in a good position to win.
Yeah. Work with people that have done it a lot, even if you don't have that resource on staff, there are a lot of folks out there, consultants that have done this many times and that, can be minimally invasive to your core business without, disrupting other people doing their core business. If you're in the early stages or you haven't really like full on went full speed ahead. So, just like you have lawyers and accountants and so forth as kind of external, consultants you work with or parties you work with, folks that have worked in corp dev and, run businesses that have been acquired, bought and sold, they can add a lot of value on a, fractional or consultancy basis.
Yeah. And I think just know that as a founder, you're a genius in what you do. Like you've built this company, and it's okay if you don't know how to do these other things, but other people are experts in these areas. And so you want to partner with them and assemble a team so they can help you in those ways. And if you're like, again, I don't know investment bank from like my ATM machine or whatnot, we have resources that can help you. So we'll drop those in the show notes for a list of reputable investment banks and different financial advisors that you can work with. And you can always check out our new resources at privateequityexperience.com. But now you know about due diligence, a very important part of the process. So thanks, Ed. Thanks, Rory. Catch you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.